All right, everybody, welcome in to Load the Box. I am your host, Jordan Hawthorne. I'm joined, as always, by the marvelous and wonderful Jack Day. And Jack, tonight's our first night back in, what, 2 weeks since you've kind of been on a little vacation. I think you went down to, I think, Virginia. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, I actually was in kind of in your neck of the woods a little bit. Drove through Ohio, and on our way back, it was actually, I don't know if you guys got hit with it, but it was like some weird wintry mix, and it looked like it was a decently big storm because it's the first home run that was hit of the baseball season was in Detroit, and it was Miguel Cabrera hitting like a line shot like through the snow,
Oh,
which
really?
I appreciate a lot more than probably people down south do. I think that's awesome when baseball is being played out in the cold, but yeah, it was a good trip. Went out and saw the little brother, and I'm excited to be home now. And it's April, and we're getting closer to the draft, so I'm pumped to start easing back into the show.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of where I'm at. Draft is 3 weeks from Thursday. Well, tonight. 3 weeks from tonight. Um, it's going to be I think it's on April 29th is the start date. So over the course of the next few weeks, it is going to be weekly content on. Oh, it's Wednesday, not Thursday. I'm an idiot. It's going to be weekly content every Wednesday, right around 6 to 6:30, sometime in there. We're going to do some mock drafts. While we're doing the mock drafts, we're going to go through some prospects that we like, and kind of, things can change on a dime. As we saw earlier this week with Jeff Gladney turning himself in. That's an ugly situation that I won't joke about, but I will. I'm sure we'll kind of talk about it. And unfortunately, because he plays for our football team, we will talk about, like, should we draft a colonel now? Because he's probably going to prison for a while. So should probably cut the guy if what he's alleged of is true. Anyway, not to be a downer. Um, yeah, I bought out the T Jack jersey, Rest in Power, because it just felt like a T Jack kind of night. I got home, I grabbed a shower, and I was like, what do I want to wear for the show tonight? Had to go with the T Jack. So, one of my favorite jerseys that I own, and it was actually my dad's before it was mine, so it's a hand me down. But I'm starting to ramble here. We have a lot to talk about and little structure. I think Jack has a better idea for this show than I do. So Jack, I'm going to pass it off to you and let's start talking about some news.
Yeah, and if you're watching this, make sure you're following us on Twitter. We're approaching that 1,100 follower mark. It seems like it was probably this time last year when we were starting to really push towards that 1,000 follower mark. We're gonna, as you would say, the trek to 2,000 is alive, but we need to start with 1,100 first. So follow us at LTB Vikings, Load the Box Vikings. Pretty self-explanatory, but the first little bit of news that I wanted to talk about, probably the news that I think the majority of Vikings fans are the most excited about from this offseason so far is the signing. This is how far back that we haven't done a show. The signing of Patrick Peterson to Minnesota. Like, I absolutely love that. Not only just because it's Patrick Peterson, he's a three-time All-Pro cornerback. He's made the Pro Bowl 8 times, I believe. I saw a clip after we signed him saying it was him and Harrison Smith kind of just talking back and forth at the Pro Bowl, and Harrison was like, how many times is this for you? And he's like, oh, this is 8. And like just a casual 8. And he's been in the league. I mean, yes, he's a little bit older. If you need to flashback memories, Terrence Newman was a lot older. I think Patrick Peterson is 31 years old, which is the same exact age that Xavier Rhodes is, if you want to put that into perspective. And we saw Terrence Newman come in and do some wonders, not only for himself in that Vikings secondary when he first came to Minnesota, but for the youth in it as well. I think he was able to take a lot of those guys under his wing and kind of get them to the next level. And I'm hoping we can see that with Patrick Peterson, with a guy like Cameron Dancer. You bring back Mackenzie Alexander in that secondary as well. Kind of just throw them all in there together. And you go out and you get Xavier Woods, who prior to last season when Dallas was using him kind of in a similar role, a little bit more as what Harrison Smith does for the Vikings. They were using him in that role. He's a lot better if he's a free roaming safety playing the deep coverage. And that's exactly where I see him in this defense, because I don't want Harrison Smith out of those situations where he's down in the box. So the Vikings made their secondary a priority. Obviously, you touch on the Jeff Gladney news a little bit. Very, very ugly situation that neither of us, I don't think anyone wants to spend a lot of time talking about it, but that secondary, even without Jeff Gladney, if that's kind of the direction the team is going to have to go, if everything pans out as we've seen on Twitter the last couple of days, it hasn't been pretty, but that Patrick Peterson sign and the Mackenzie Alexander sign, I think you can comfortably throw Mackenzie Alexander in the slot with Patrick Peterson and Cameron Dancer out wide. That secondary with Xavier Woods back there, hopefully get a legit pass rush back in this defense as well this year. This defense, I'm not ready to quite say it's going to be 2017 good, but this, I think, is going to be the best Vikings defense that we've seen with Kirk Cousins playing quarterback in the last 3 years. So I think they've done enough in that secondary. There's still a lot of positions. That other DN position is a position of need, in my opinion. You still need to shore up that offensive line a little bit as well. But I'll let you get some words in here because I just kind of rambled on and talked about like 3+ additions that we made in the secondary. So
No, yo, A-OK. The offensive line doesn't need any help, by the way, Jack. We signed Dakota Dozier. So he's back on the team. On my life, if he is stouting on the offensive line week 1, I would say, like, I'm not going to be a Vikings fan. That's not going to happen. I don't know what threat I can make, but just like, oh my, at some point the fans have to be correct about something. And I think the fans are correct about Dakota Dozier. Sure, he can be a good run-blocking guard, but dear God, Kirk Cousins is going to die if you let Dakota Dozier play, especially going up against the talent on the interior defensive lines that we're going to be playing. Nathan Nickel is in the chat saying, who is going to prison? And also that Load the Box is the best Vikings podcast. I agree with you on the second statement, though, Nathan. Thank you for tuning in. And also, that's the news that I'll go with because I'll be the Debbie Downer, if you will. The Vikings' second-year defensive back, why is his name going away from me now?
Jeff Gladney.
Thank you. Jeff Gladney turned himself in earlier this week for domestic assault. I don't know the proper.
I think it was like it was something along the lines of like a 3rd-degree family violence assault.
Yeah.
It was kind of a longer.
To not go into too gruesome of details. If you want that, you can go look it up. It's a gruesome story, what he's being accused of. Him turning himself in, he's facing 2 to 10 years in prison. And that's concern number 1. I feel awful for that poor young woman who had to go through that. And you know, it's an awful situation. It really is. Domestic violence is never something to joke about, and you know, I'll put my serious face on for a second, but you do address how it affects the team. And I saw on Twitter a few people talking like, oh, Patrick Peterson, that signing looks a lot more important now. And I agree with that. But honestly, I think it makes the Mackenzie Alexander signing seem even more important because I think Gladney was going to be playing a lot of that slot role. And now I think Mac Alexander jumps in and he's going to be in the slot. And you're going to see Dantzler and Peterson covering outside. And I'm excited to see what the secondary is able to do. Like you said, it's been a very defense-heavy free agency, so I'm expecting an offensive-heavy draft, which I'm sure the fan base is actually going to love. No sarcasm, because it's always more exciting to get your left tackle of the future and a third-string wide receiver and a kick returner and some more offensive linemen. I mean, just tons of guys, hopefully to help Cousins in that offense. Have a similar year to last year, but maybe keep Cousins clean a little bit more. And maybe open just 1 or 2 more lanes for Dalvin, although Dalvin had a pretty solid year last year, especially considering the injury. But I'm looking to see other news besides the Dakota Dozier signing. That's kind of it really has me bummed out because it makes me scared that Rick Spielman legitimately thinks that Dakota Dozier is the answer at the guard position, and it's almost like that Pat Elflein situation where it's like, better the evil we know than the one that we don't. Throw somebody else in there. For the love of God, do whatever you have to do. Just draft somebody. Draft Elijah Vera Tucker if you have to at 14, or trade down and take him later in the first round and get a second round pick. I don't care what you have to do. You just can't let that guy line up as one of your starting 5 offensive linemen. If he's going to be a backup, cool. Yeah, he's good at running the ball. He could be a good he's good at blocking to run the ball, so he could be a good backup guard. But please God, let the pain end of watching Dakota Dozier get trampled over when it comes to protecting Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think they were talking about it. I think it was Zimmer in his press conference was kind of talking about the offensive line, and he kind of just went over it lightly and said, you know what, we have some guys there. I saw a tweet about Kyle Hinton, who was a 7th-round draft pick either last year or the year before, and it was essentially going over his athletic profile. And his athletic profile was insane. He was like 90th percentile and above in literally every single category. But I just want to say I am tired of doing this year over year over year where it's like, hey, we have a guy named Drew Samia who's 4th-round draft pick last year, 2 years ago. I know he's showing promise in practice. He's something to be excited for. We have faith in the guys that we have in this locker room. It's time to stop having faith in this offensive line and just throwing out I mean, they went out. That's another piece of news. They did go out. They traded a 6th-rounder for Mason Cole, which I like because you're probably not going to find well, you're definitely not going to find someone in the 6th round with NFL experience. He started as a center for the Cardinals last year. He did play 2 games at guard for the Cardinals as well, and those are 2 of his higher ranking performances, according to PFF. I don't know if that's their plan. Their big plan was trading for Mason Cole and letting him and Dakota Dozier battle for each other for that left guard spot. Because I think right now, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like Ezra Cleveland is going to be sticking at that right guard position. And I like that because I think this offensive tackle class is a lot deeper than the interior. And a lot of the mocks that I've been doing as of late, I've been going with a tackle in the 1st or 2nd round. Brady Christensen is a name that when we did our first mock draft, BYU, Zach Wilson's blindside protector, he was going in like the 4th or 5th round, and he had a very good pro day and is now bumped all the way into the 2nd or early 3rd round. He's a name that I've been keeping an eye on, has drawn some comparisons to David Bakhtiari, who the Vikings have gone up against year over year over the last several years. There's a lot of there's a big sweet spot in that 2nd to 3rd round. I think Trey Smith is another guard type player with an athletic profile out of Tennessee that could fit in this zone scheme that we run. But I agree with you 100%. I think the offensive line is going to need to get addressed multiple times within the first 4 rounds. They have 3 or 4 4th-round picks, and I still think the best case scenario is a trade back where you can either you trade back and you get best player available and you get back into that 2nd round somehow. I think you have enough ammunition in the 3rd and 4th round to trade back into the 2nd round as well if you want, but I really want the Vikings to try and focus unless a huge name falls to 14. And I've been doing some mock drafts, which we can save this debate for when all of your Ohio friends want to come and attack me when we're doing the mock drafts next week. But I've been doing mock after mock, and Justin Fields has been falling to the Vikings at 14. If a guy like that falls to 14 and the Vikings don't pull the trigger, that's the type of thing that they could be kicking themselves for 2, 3, 4 years down the road when Kirk Cousins is no longer here. So sorry, I just went on a complete rant and talked about all of that in under one umbrella, but I wanted to address that question and basically just wrap up my thoughts by saying, yes, this team is going to have to address that offensive line early and often in this draft.
Yeah, looking at the draft order, I would be very surprised if a guy like Fields got all the way down to 14. If he gets there, pull the trigger. But like, if he I think Philadelphia might be interested. I think Denver is interested. Detroit might be interested. I know they have Goff, but like, who the hell is Goff? You know, like he's just played in a Super Bowl. You know what? It's whatever.
I said this to a buddy today as well. I know there's rumors from legit sources saying that San Fran has legitimate interest in Mac Jones at number 3.
Yeah.
I don't buy into that personally because I've watched Justin Fields play football and I've watched Mac Jones play football, and there's a big difference. I don't know if there's some sort of trick that they're using. Even I think Trey Lance and Justin Fields both have a higher ceiling than Mac Jones. Mac Jones might be the safer pick, but I don't think you trade up to the 3rd overall pick to get the safest pick. I think you go for someone that has that ceiling that could turn into someone that's a lot. But I think the ceiling for Mac Jones is kind of a worse version of Kirk Cousins. If you can get that out of him and surround him with everything, I think he could be good in San Francisco. But I don't think you settle for good with the 3rd overall pick. I think you try to get something great.
Yeah, if Mac Jones goes in the top 5, I'll admit that I know nothing about football. Also, Amy Lamont in the chat saying hello. Hi, Amy. Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. But yeah, Mac Jones belongs nowhere in the top 16, I don't think. I mean, maybe he's a guy, and Lamar Jackson has done great things in the NFL so far, and he's he set the league on fire a couple years ago. He's led his team to the playoffs. He's a very good quarterback. It's kind of one of those situations where it's like maybe a team trades in to like pick 32 to get Mac Jones, just that way they have a 5th-year option with him. You kind of get to exercise that option. So I don't know. Mac Jones going that high would shock me, but I have seen the approach that San Francisco is apparently very interested in. Look, if Shanahan looks at Mac Jones as Kirk Cousins, maybe a little more athletic or less, I really don't know all that much about him. I haven't looked too hard outside of the top, like, 4 QBs, and then the guy from SMU, whose name is Shane Buechele. If he thinks he's a Kirk Cousins 2.0, then maybe Shanahan wants to just get his Kirk Cousins, because we all know Kyle Shanahan is head over heels with Kirk Cousins. If you want him that bad, trade for him, you coward. We'll take the number 3 overall pick, and that's it. That's all we want. You can have him. And we can walk away from this draft with a Justin Fields. So if we really want to make the Jets' life better, trade up to 2. Shouldn't cost that much, and get Zach Wilson. And then me and Jack will actually I will drive to Minnesota with 2 bottles of champagne, and we will pop the Cokes and go nuts with the ski goggles on.
I see Billy Biskupski is in the chat saying Ohio State quarterbacks are bust. We can save that debate for the draft shows coming up, but
absolutely,
I do think Billy Biskupski would be at that party with us, popping champagne, celebrating with Zach Wilson, because he also likes Zach Wilson.
Every time he gets brought up, I'm going to tell the story. We go to do a quarterback show mid-season, as is tradition. Oh, Tom Day says 3 bottles. There you go. Well, I'm buying a case of champagne, driving up. The Vikings are taking Zach Wilson, and I'm not going to be able to afford my first month's house payment, but that's okay. But every time he gets brought up, I have to bring up, we do our mid-season quarterback show, as is tradition here on Load the Box, and Jack said, I'd really like to do Zach Wilson. I want to study him and talk about him, and I was like, you garbage can. Like, that's my guy. Like, I talked about Joe Burrow 2 years ago. I wanted to talk about Zach Wilson this year. I'd look like the QB genius, but now me and Jack get to kind of share the credit, because I think everybody started to see the special things that he can do on the field. But to talk a little less about the draft and go into some more Vikings news quickly, we did lose some free agents today, and maybe since our last show, Anthony Harris is going to the Eagles. I don't know if we covered that on our last show. Eric Wilson also going to the Eagles, and Philadelphia, it's almost like how we lost Stefanski to the Browns, and we lost some other offensive coordinator. We always just are replacing coordinators. Pat Shermer was the other one. It's like that. We lose these free agents because they play on Mike Zimmer's defense, and even though they had a down season last year, I think a lot of that was because of the very subpar defensive line and unexperienced defensive backs. But the Eagles signed 2 guys off of our team, and Nick Vigil, who it was reported 3 weeks ago signed with the Vikings, officially inked his name down on the paper, and that's that. He's a Viking. I think he's a hell of an addition, and I'm super excited to see him line up. He's obviously going to be playing in the same role that like Wilson, Ben Gideon was before him. Well, he's going to be, whenever we're in the base package, he'll come in, help defend the run, but it's still going to be Kendricks and Anthony Barr out there, I think, on the more coveragey situations. And maybe Anthony Barr can rush the passer a little bit this year, too. Jack, what do you think of the losses that we have, specifically Eric Wilson and his replacement in Nick Vigil? Also, Karen Cloudman, I'm going to try really hard. DeJonko? Or is it DeJonko? I don't know.
I think is how you
DeJonko, thank you. Karen DeJonko in the chat saying, "Hi, Jack. It is good to see your face." So Jack, you
I
have
appreciate
fans.
that, Karen.
But yeah, your
Going
thoughts.
into, I was kind of an advocate for 100% being okay with not paying Eric Wilson. I think we have two great linebackers in Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks, and I think a guy like Nick Vigil, who had shown he has a relationship with Gunther too, the special assistant or whatever they call that kind of revolving door of older, I almost said washed up, older coaches that come in. They had Capers do it last year, and Gunther's coming in this year. He has connections with him. He started, I think, 15 or 16 games in his final season with Cincinnati. Played with the Chargers last year, and I think he can play. We got him cheaper than what I don't know what the Eric Wilson contract went for. I know you brought that up right before the show started.
3.25 million.
I believe Vigil is at least like half of that. If you want to look that up, I don't exactly.
I've got it right here.
I don't think it was that big.
Is it really not gonna say? Is it really not gonna say?
I want to say it was like,
keep talking and I'll find it.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 1 point something million, but I do have the Vikings depth chart up here, and I think the defense was worrisome going into last year, and I feel a lot more comfortable after the free agent additions. I think there's still going to be a couple defensive picks earlier on, with whether that be a first round pick if you go pass rusher. I know the Vikings don't typically tend to do that, but if they see somebody start to fall, and especially if they trade back and that's best player available, I'm not gonna be shocked if they go linebacker. I think the guy from Penn State, there's some off the field concerns, but the kid from North Dakota, the UMD Bulldog just beat North Dakota to get to the Frozen Four. That's why I almost said that. But Notre Dame has a linebacker that's an absolute stud as well, and I could see Mike Zimmer licking his chops over a guy like that. But right now, our starting depth chart, really the only weak spot, and I know the depth is an issue still. Yes, there's some key positions that need more depth, but the biggest concern is Stephon Weatherly starting on the opposite side of Daniil Hunter. I think that's something that needs to get addressed. I like the Weatherly signing. I think he flourished here when he was here, and then he went to Carolina and it didn't pan out. Bring him back on a cheap deal. I'm all for that, but I would love to get another, not necessarily like a DJ Wanham. He was a fourth round. Utilize a first, second round pick. There was a lot of reports saying the Vikings have had calls with Carlos Basham out of Wake Forest. He's a pass rusher that's drawn some comparisons to Everson Griffin, who, if you remember a couple years ago, Everson Griffin and Daniil Hunter, when Daniil Hunter was kind of on the rise and Everson Griffin was still kind of on the peak, but kind of starting to descend, they were fun to watch. And if you can get another guy with that style, I think you can bump him down, and you can have Weatherly on the outside. You could play Basham from like the interior too, or you can bump Daniil and Weatherly inside. We saw that when they did that with Everson Griffin in that Saints playoff, when they had Everson Griffin and Daniil Hunter on the inside, and then it was Weatherly and someone else on the outside. So I'm excited for this defense. I think Patrick Peterson is going to do wonders for Cameron Dantzler as well. Patrick Peterson, I wanted to say this too. Patrick Peterson wanted to come to Minnesota. So all the people out there that are talking about Zimmer has ruined this culture, he's driven this program into the ground because of Kirk Cousins, no one wants to play for this guy. You're wrong, because probably the best cornerback, if not, he's a top 3 cornerback in the last decade, wanted to come here because he wanted to essentially get his career, I don't want to say jump started, because he's been a damn good player in the NFL for a long time, but he knows what Mike Zimmer has done with names like Terrence Newman, and he thinks he can do that with himself too. I am all for that. If you can't tell, I'm pretty excited about the Patrick Peterson sign, and that's kind of the one. Delvin Tomlinson is another one that I'm very excited about. And then you get, it's hard to not be excited about this Vikings defense with all the free agency additions, with Michael Pierce coming back, with Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, and Daniil Hunter coming back. And on top of it, you sprinkle in a couple home run free agency additions, in my opinion. Yes, the offensive line needs to get addressed. I would love QB2 to get addressed at some point in this draft. Wide receiver 3, that's also going to turn into a wide receiver 2 need in a few years when Adam Thielen starts to descend. But they have, I still think they have 9 or 10 draft picks left, and I think they're going to acquire more by hopefully trading back. So I think the state of the Vikings franchise right now going into the draft, I have a lot better feelings about it than I did a year ago.
Yeah, no, it's going to be – so I think the Vikings free agency, and this is kind of my final thoughts, and then I think we can start wrapping up. Free agency has shown, I think Zimmer and Spielman are both aware the hot seat, fully on fire. They're getting some sweat on their asses, and they need to. How do I? They need to like win significant playoff games, and if it means getting to another NFC title game to extend it, that might be what it means. But I don't think the Wilfs are going to be happy with just a wild card one and done. I really think that they want to see this team contend for the division all the way through week 18 now, because there's a 17th game. So contend for the division the entire year. If we don't win the division, win one, maybe two playoff games. Obviously, the ultimate goal is a Super Bowl, but because they're so all in, this does feel like the year that maybe Slick Rick takes all those 7th round picks and unloads them, moves up, picks a bunch of times in the top 100 to really get some potential styles on this team. Not that we don't already have styles on this team, not that we're not already looking really good on the defensive side of the ball, but I think on the offensive side, I do expect to see a wide receiver taken in probably the 2nd or 3rd round. I expect to see multiple offensive linemen taken, and I really think this is where you build that wall in front of Cousins, you keep running the ball with Cook, you get another weapon so that way Chad Beebe can see the field less, so he can't drop any more punts. You also need a punt returner, but that probably will be the wide receiver 3. Oh, Patrick Peterson, I don't know. But I think this is a year where they're going to go all in. The draft, I hope, reflects that, and I really hope we see this 2021 Vikings squad go out, fans in the stands once again. At least Goodell thinks so. And let's kick some butt and let's win a Super Bowl and let's do the dang thing. And everyone that's signing these 1-year deals to prove it, like Patrick Peterson did, like Nick Vigil did. If they prove it, then we're gonna have a really good year and we're gonna have a chance to potentially be celebrating some playoff wins, and hopefully the ultimate playoff win. I will say, something just popped up. Oh, it was a chat. Jeremiah Newell said 2021 make Vikings defense great again. I agree with you. I'm still trying to find a make football violent again hat, because that's still the best thing Andrew Sendejo did in his NFL career. I'll put him in the Hall of Fame just for that hat. But yeah, no, this was definitely I'm on Pro Football Talk. I'll give them a plug like they need it. Let me see. Where was it at? There's an article on there about how Mike Zimmer is rejuvenated by all of these defensive additions, and I would hope that he would be. So it's going to be a fun year. We're going to talk more about the draft. I'm sure we're probably going to do mock draft after mock draft after mock draft as we get closer and closer, continuing to inch even closer to that draft day in 3 weeks and 1 day. But other than that, Jack, I think I'm good. I'll let you get whatever you have off your chest, and I think I'm good.
We really just had that entire discussion about free agents and the draft just to watch Mike Zimmer slide into pick 14 and have Roger Goodell go up to the podium and say, with the 14th pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Alabama cornerback Patrick Surtain. I'm
who would be mad?
Kidding. I wouldn't be that upset. I think Vikings Twitter would probably burn to the ground if that were the case. I don't think it's that far of a I think it could happen. If a guy like that falls to the 14 spot, it's not something that I would look past Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman doing. I definitely think there are other areas of concern, but I've said this a million times on the show. You always draft best player available. You don't always necessarily go for need. If best case scenario, need and best player available collide with each other and somehow Panisse Sewell falls to us at 14, which I don't think that's going to happen either. I still think the best case scenario is a trade back out of that 14 spot, maybe into the early 20s, something that allows you to acquire another second round pick, maybe a second round and a fourth round pick, and that first in the 20. It just depends on who's there at 14. If one of those quarterbacks falls to the Vikings at 14, I would fully expect a team like maybe the Chicago Bears try to call us. And I don't know if the Vikings are going to want to be doing much trading with the Chicago Bears on draft night and getting another quarterback in the division other than Andy Dalton, who I'm very excited to play in Chicago. I shouldn't say that because it doesn't matter who starts for Chicago. The Vikings always lose at least one game against the Bears every single year, so it seems. But no, I'm really looking forward to the next couple weeks of draft shows. I think it's going to be a whole lot of mocks. Essentially, we might start with a couple mocks where we do one where it's 1 through 4, just through 4 rounds, and then probably the last week, the Wednesday before the draft, we just do a full blown final mock draft where we kind of go through that. And I'm excited. I was talking to Jordan a little bit about this before the show. Last year we kind of went position by position, but we don't really have the time to do that. Obviously I was on vacation, Jordan's moving as well, so we didn't really have the time to dive into that. But that doesn't mean that Jordan and myself haven't been watching these guys, so I'm excited to essentially do mock drafts while kind of assessing the board, how it falls, and talking about some of those guys who we could see as a potential fit here in Minnesota. So I think the next couple of weeks are going to be fun.
I didn't want to cut you off. I did want to get the final chat, I believe, in Chris Paxetta. Fun to the show. He's actually been on the show. For I think the first off-season episode, I had him come over and sit, and we kind of just talked about the Browns and just kind of talked on camera. But he said, "Rest in peace to the answer, Tavares Jackson. Rest in power." He's the biggest Tavares Jackson fan I know, and the guy roots for the Browns. So
that guy could sling the football. I remember going to training camp as a kid and seeing the ball. The ball had a different velocity when it came off of his hands. He could throw the ball very hard. It didn't always work out in his favor on the field, but the guy had a lot of potential. And I'm sure my dad has that same exact jersey hanging up in his closet somewhere. So,
right.
No, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next couple weeks. I think both Jordan and myself kind of enjoy this time of year more than we probably should. There's a lot of good sports going on. The Twins have their home opener tomorrow. The Wild are fun to watch right now. Like I said, UMD is playing in the Frozen Four tomorrow night later. I think it's an 8 p.m. Central game. If you're looking for, there's 3 of the 4 Frozen Four teams are from Minnesota, so I'm kind of excited to watch it. I'm not a huge hockey guy, but whenever the Bulldogs are in it, which I'm sure there's Gophers fans listening, so I don't want to, might be a touchy subject, but they've been in the Frozen Four for the last 4 seasons in a row, so I'm excited to get to watch them as well.
And I have to throw this in there because I do live in Cincinnati. The Reds are 5-1 and have the best offense in baseball right now, so it's been exciting to watch them play this season.
Yeah, baseball. I think we're both kind of baseball nerds to an extent. I think it kind of bridges that gap from being.
I'm definitely more casual, but it's always
more
fun.
Like a bridge of a gap from. I don't know. I always go from not really caring about sports from usually it's December or January whenever the Vikings are done, and then we kind of start getting excited for the draft,
right.
And then baseball hits and all this stuff kind of hits. The Masters is on this weekend. We didn't even touch on that as well. I don't know if you're a huge golf guy or not, but it's the best tournament in golf, so that'll be a fun one as well. But
it's a good time for sports. Just wish football was back.
Good time for sports. I think the draft is number 1 on both of our lists. I think we're both. I mean, I'm just pumped to hear that first jingle. I was listening to Jordan Reed's podcast, friend of the show, and he has that kind of when he makes the transition from he does like a little intro to the show, and then he brings on his guest, and it has the little jingle. And I was
yeah,
man, this is mid-drive, and as I'm like 10 hours into a drive going to Virginia, half asleep, and that woke me up instantly. I got me fired up. So
got your blood pumping.
I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks. I don't really have any pump-up speech other than the fact that the Vikings defense is going to be fun to watch again. I think this offense, it didn't lose much, but it also didn't really gain a lot. It lost Riley Reef. I think you can find an adequate replacement for Riley Reef. I'm really curious to see what Zimmer and what Rick Spielman see in the offensive line right now. I don't know how, if you were to, this can be a question that we can address later, probably on one of the draft shows, but I don't know how I would put the 5 starters on this offensive line right now. It would probably have to do with, something along the lines of moving O'Neal to left tackle and having Rashad Hill start at right tackle, which I don't really love the idea of doing, but that's why we still have an entire draft to get through, and there's still free agency as well. Forrest Lamp was the name that I think we have brought up on this show because there was rumored interest from the Vikings going after him. It's escaping my mind where he just signed. Oh, it was Buffalo. He signed a like 1 year low end deal with Buffalo. I don't know why the Vikings aren't trying to match that and bring guys in here. Maybe they still have plans. There are some rumors circulating around Twitter with Eric Fisher. I'd be more than okay with that as well, but there's a lot of free agency and a lot of draft talk left. So I'll save those for the upcoming weeks. I had a fun show tonight. Make sure you're following us at LTB Vikings on Twitter. We're approaching that 1,100 follower mark. So trying to get there. I think we're 25 or so followers away from that mark. But other than that, then make sure you tune in for the next couple weeks, because they're going to be really laid back, but also really entertaining and fun shows where we just really dive into the draft, do a couple mock drafts each night, talk about some prospects. And then before you know it, in 3 weeks, we're going to be talking, and it's going to be the draft the following night. And I think Jordan and myself are both going to be going crazy.